Have you ever felt like your mind won't stop moving? Like there's a radio station playing in the background of every moment, analyzing, rehearsing, replaying conversations from 3 years ago at 2 a.m., scanning the room for signs of danger that aren't there, predicting futures that may never come. You're not broken. You're not doing life wrong. What you're experiencing isn't a flaw in your design. It's a feature that once kept you alive. A survival algorithm written in childhood, carved into the neural pathways of a brain that learned very early that thinking was safer than feeling, that vigilance was love, that if you could just analyze it enough, predict it enough, control it enough, you'd finally be safe. But here's the paradox. The mind that was meant to protect you has become the very cage you're trying to escape. This is the story of overthinking, not as a bad habit, but as a response to a world that once required you to be more aware than any child should ever have to be. And more than that, this is the map towards something else, toward the body, toward presence, toward the radical act of not thinking your way out of your own life. The overthinking mind is a labyrinth that builds itself. Each thought spawns another thought, which spawns a feeling about the thought, which spawns a thought about the feeling, until you're 7 layers deep into a psychological archaeology of a moment that lasted 3 seconds. Someone looked at you strangely at the grocery store, and now you're excavating your entire relational history, your worth as a human being, the fundamental nature of your lovability. This is what psychologists call rumination. But that clinical word doesn't capture the lived experience of it, the way it feels like drowning in air, the way your body is sitting in a chair, but your mind is simultaneously in the past, the future, and some hypothetical alternate timeline where you said the right thing, were the right person, didn't make that mistake. The restless mind mistakes motion for progress. It believes that if it just thinks hard enough, long enough, thoroughly enough, it will solve the unsolvable. How to be loved without being vulnerable, how to be safe without being present, how to control the uncontrollable fact of being alive and exposed in a world that doesn't guarantee anything. But here's what the thinking mind doesn't understand. You cannot think your way to peace, because thinking is the language of problems, and peace is the language of presence. They speak different tongues, and somewhere along the way, you learn to translate every experience into thought, every feeling into analysis, every moment into meaning, until you forgot how to simply be without narrating the experience of being. To understand the overthinking mind, we must travel backward, not to philosophy or neuroscience first, but to a child's bedroom, to the space where a young nervous system learned its first lessons about safety. Hypervigilance doesn't begin as a thought pattern. It begins as a survival instinct in an environment that required constant monitoring. Perhaps there was a parent whose moods shifted like weather systems, unpredictable and suddenly dark. Perhaps there was chaos that demanded you become the stable one, the one who anticipated needs, who read faces like scripture, who learned that your value was measured in how well you could predict and prevent disaster. Or perhaps it was subtler than that, an anxious household where worry was the ambient temperature, where love was expressed through concern and concern expressed through control, where you learned osmotically that the world is fundamentally unsafe and the only defense is to think about everything before it happens. The child who becomes the overthinker is often the child who was too aware, too soon. The one who learned to parent their own parents emotionally. The one who became fluent in the micro-expressions of adult distress before they could tie their own shoes. The one who discovered that thinking, analyzing, predicting, controlling could create the illusion of safety in a world that felt fundamentally unstable. And here's the cruel gift of it. It worked. Your hypervigilance kept you safe. Your overthinking made you valuable. Your ability to anticipate and adapt became your superpower, your identity, the thing that made you you. Until it didn't. Until the survival mechanism became the prison. Until the child's solution became the adult's suffering. Let's descend into the architecture of the brain itself. Because overthinking isn't just psychological theater. It's neurobiology. It's the way your nervous system learned to wire itself when the world demanded constant vigilance. The brain has a structure called the amygdala, your ancient alarm system, the part that screams danger before your conscious mind even registers a threat. In childhood hypervigilance, this alarm becomes hypersensitive, firing at shadows, at maybes, at the mere possibility of emotional pain. It learns to see threats everywhere, because once threats were everywhere. Then there's the prefrontal cortex, your executive function, your analyzer, your meaning maker. In a nervous system shaped by early instability, this part goes into overdrive, trying to think its way to safety, to predict every outcome, to control every variable. It becomes the mind's obsessive manager, convinced that if it just works hard enough, plans thoroughly enough, it can prevent all future pain. But here's the neurological trap. The more you think, the more you strengthen the neural pathways of thinking. Every rumination is a rehearsal. Every anxious loop carves the groove deeper. Your brain becomes a vinyl record stuck on the same track, and consciousness, instead of being an open field of possibility, becomes a narrow corridor you walk again and again and again. Psychologists call this cognitive fusion, the collapse of the distinction between your thoughts and reality itself. You don't have thoughts. You are your thoughts. The narrative becomes the narrator. The story becomes the self. And beneath all of this thinking, your body, that ancient wise creature, is trying to tell you something. It's holding tension in your shoulders. It's shallow breathing. It's activating your sympathetic nervous system, keeping you in a low-grade state of fight or flight, even when you're sitting safely on your couch. Because your body remembers what your mind tries to transcend, that you learn to survive by leaving yourself, by ascending into thought and abandoning the felt sense of being here, now, embodied, alive. The overthinking mind is both shield and prison. It protected the child, but it suffocates the adult who's trying to finally, actually live. Now layer onto this already vigilant nervous system the architecture of the 21st century, a world designed to fracture attention, to commodify consciousness, to turn your mind into a marketplace where everyone is selling and nothing is ever enough. The overthinking mind meets the infinite scroll. The hypervigilant brain meets the 24-hour news cycle. The child who learned to monitor everything for safety now lives in an information ecosystem that demands constant monitoring, that rewards reactivity, that profits from your inability to look away. Every notification is a small betrayal of presence. Every just checking is an abandonment of the moment you're actually living. The digital age doesn't cause overthinking, but it weaponizes it. It takes your survival mechanism and turns it into an economic engine. Your attention becomes currency. Your anxiety becomes engagement. Your inability to rest becomes someone else's quarterly earnings report. And the cruelest part? The more overwhelmed you become, the more you think you need to think more. To consume more information, to understand more perspectives, to have more opinions about more things happening in more places to more people you'll never meet. The overthinking mind mistakes this for consciousness, for being informed, for caring, when really, it's just the same childhood pattern playing out. On a global stage, you're trying to make the world safe by knowing everything about it, by having a position on it, by analyzing it to death. But the world was never meant to be held entirely in your mind. Some things are meant to be witnessed, not solved. Felt, not analyzed. Experienced in the body, not archived in the vault of thought. The modern world is loud, but your overthinking is trying to be louder. And in that escalation, you lose the one thing that could actually save you. The ability to hear yourself beneath the noise. There's a particular kind of tiredness that comes with chronic overthinking. Not the tiredness of physical exertion, but something deeper. A fatigue of the soul, an exhaustion that sleep doesn't touch, because the overthinking mind doesn't just analyze cause events, it analyzes emotions, yours, theirs, everyone's. You've become an emotional archaeologist, excavating the subtext of every interaction, translating every silence into meaning, every glance into judgments, every pause into rejection. You feel too much, and then you think about feeling too much, and then you feel bad about thinking about feeling too much, until you're trapped in a house of mirrors where every emotion reflects infinitely into more emotions about emotions. This is what happens when empathy, that beautiful, necessary human capacity, becomes hijacked by hypervigilance. You learned early to attune yourself to others' emotional states for survival, to be the thermostat, constantly adjusting to keep the temperature safe, to absorb others' pain, as though it were your job to metabolize it, to solve it, to carry it so they wouldn't have to. And now, as an adult, you're still doing it. You walk into a room and immediately scan the emotional weather. Someone is quiet, and you spin stories about what you did wrong. Someone is upset, and you shapeshift to soothe them. You've become so good at holding space for others that you've forgotten how to take up space yourself. The overthinker is often the overfeeler, the one who experiences life at a volume others can't hear, the one who was told they were too sensitive, too intense, too much, when really they were just too awake in a world that preferred them sedated. But here's the truth, no one tells you. You were never too much. You were just never taught that you didn't have to carry everything, that your nervous system could relax, that other people's emotions could exist without you solving them, that you could feel without drowning, that you could think without disappearing into thought. So how do you step off the wheel? How do you quiet a mind that has been your guardian, your identity, your constant companion for decades? Not through more thinking, not through analyzing the overthinking, not through a perfect strategy or a 5-step program or one more book that promises to fix you, because you were never broken to begin with. The path out of the thinking mind is through the body, through the radical, uncomfortable, deeply vulnerable act of coming back, down from your head, and into the flesh that's been waiting for you all along. This is what mindfulness actually is. Not some Instagram aesthetic of perfect meditation postures and serene faces, but the raw, difficult practice of feeling what you've spent a lifetime thinking your way around. The tightness in your chest, the shallow breath, the way your shoulders have been hunched toward your ears, like they're expecting a blow that isn't coming. Embodiment means learning to trust the body's intelligence again, to recognize that your nervous system, beneath all the mental noise, knows how to regulate itself. When you stop hijacking the process with thought, it knows how to breathe, how to discharge tension, how to return to baseline when you stop telling it stories about why it's not safe to rest. Start small, not with grand transformations, but with moments. Notice when you're spiraling, not to judge it, not to fix it, but just to witness. Ah, there's the thinking again. There's the old pattern. And this is the practice. Choose something else. Choose your breath. Choose the sensation of your feet on the ground. Choose the sound of the world around you instead of the sound of your mind narrating the world. This is the practice of surrender. Not surrender as defeat, but surrender as release. As the recognition that you don't have to control every outcome, predict every possibility, or solve every problem before it arrives. That life can be lived in the not knowing, in the space between stimulus and response, in the pause where presence lives. Mindfulness teaches you this. Thoughts are not facts. They're events in consciousness, whether passing through. You don't have to believe every thought you think. You don't have to follow every mental thread down the rabbit hole. You can let thoughts arise and dissolve like clouds while you remain the sky, spacious, open, untouched by the storms moving through you. And slowly, gradually, you begin to remember what it feels like to be present, to be home what's here, in this body, in this moment, without needing it to be different, without needing to have already figured it all out. You begin to trust that you can handle what comes as it comes, rather than pre-living every possible future in your mind. This is not a cure. This is not an ending, but it is a return. A homecoming to the self you abandoned. When you learned that thinking was safer than being. There's an ancient teaching that appears across traditions, across centuries, across the wisdom lineages of humanity. The mind is a beautiful servant, but a terrible master. The overthinking mind became master somewhere along the way. It seized the throne because it had to, because no one else was protecting you, because thinking was the only tool you had in a situation that required more than a child should ever have to bear. But you're not that child anymore. You're the adult who can finally, gently, lovingly say to the mind, "Thank you. Thank you for keeping me safe. Thank you for scanning every horizon, for preparing for every disaster, for trying so hard to control what couldn't be controlled. You did your job beautifully, but I don't need you to do that anymore." This is the ultimate liberation. Not the death of thought, but the proper relationship to it. Thought as tool, not tyrant, as something you pick up when needed and set down when finished. Not the entirety of your identity, but one capacity among many. Beneath the thinking, there's something else. A presence, an awareness, a consciousness that exists prior to and beyond all the stories you tell about yourself. The Buddhists call it Original mind. The mystics call it the witness. Psychology calls it the observing self. Call it what you want, but it's been there all along, watching the whole performance, untouched by the drama of thought. It's the part of you that knows you're thinking without being the thought. The part that sees the anxiety without being anxious. The stillness beneath the storm. You are not your thoughts. You never were. So here we are, at the end of this exploration. But really, it's not an ending. It's an invitation. An invitation to notice, in this very moment, what it feels like to not be thinking. Even for just 3 seconds, to feel the weight of your body where it touches the chair, to hear the ambient sound of the room around you, to exist without commentary, without analysis, without needing this moment to be anything other than what it is. The journey from hypervigilance to presence is not a straight line. It's not a destination you arrive at and stay forever. It's a practice, a returning, 1,000 small choices to come back to the body, back to the breath, back to the irreducible fact of being alive right now. Some days you'll spiral. Some days the old patterns will feel as strong as ever. And that's not failure. That's just being human. The difference is that now you know you have a choice. The thinking mind doesn't have to be the master anymore. You were never too much. You were never broken. You were just a child who learned to survive the only way available. And that child saved your life. Honor that. Thank that. And then, gently, let it rest. Because the mind that never stops is tired. And beneath that tiredness is a longing, not for more thinking, but for less, for silence, for simplicity, for the radical permission to exist without constantly justifying your existence. You don't have to earn your peace. You don't have to think your way into worthiness. You just have to be here, breathing, present, alive. And that, just that, has always been enough.